I don't know.
Wife. And baby, right?
And baby,
okay,
yes.
I'm gonna try to do somewhat of an intro.
Absolutely,
because I'm trying to get a little bit better at this type of stuff, and I realized that I listened back to the first episode that you and I did, and I was like, dude, why has it been so long? Like, because it was such a good episode. It was so pleasant to listen to. So for the listeners, I'm sitting with my friend Cameron, and you go by Dupratte still?
Yeah, Cameron Dupratte.
Okay, because I noticed it's Cameron Pratt on Instagram.
Yeah, so it's a whole mess of things. Cameron Dupratte, Dupratte. But I also, Cameron Pratt is like my real given name. And but I've got Brother Space Bear is my musician name. That's my like stage name.
A man of many names.
Yeah, too many names, too many Instagram accounts. So
and projects.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So we met. I don't know, probably 2-3 years ago now, when we were both sort of accidentally in the same music video.
Oh yeah,
like a long time ago. We played Brothers in the Safe to Say video.
That was which one was that? Was
Sweet Ascent.
That's right, Sweet Ascent.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jordan. I know the name of your band. I actually listen to you guys, and I like your music.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were both in that, and then I don't think we had actually met until a little bit later. You did a show with Piano Stairs at the Jackpot.
Yes.
And then that's when we actually ran into each other in person, and we're like, hey, we're like brothers somehow.
I think I'm always a little nervous and a little out of it when I'm playing shows. I love playing, but I just am like really focused. And I think you came up to me and I was like, and you were like, hey, brother. And I was like, what? And I was like, oh my goodness, we were in the same music video. So I was, help me listen up. That was
nice. So we met at the Jackpot, and then I think we just kind of kept in touch from there. And then I had somebody, I don't even remember who was supposed to do the podcast that week, but I was actually supposed to do an episode with someone else, and they canceled. And then I think you and I had talked about it, and you just happened to be free. And so we got together, and it was a great episode. And we got into so much cool stuff. And I was like, man, like, why didn't we follow up a few months later? Because we just kind of scratched the surface of so many different things last time.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's probably been a lot going on since then.
Oh my!
Like you were just saying, when you got here, you live in Chicago now.
I do, yes.
And you have a kid and a wife.
Yeah.
And that's all new, I think, since last time.
That's all. Yeah, that's all new for me. And I think before that, I was like working on an album, and since then I released the album. I began working, and I've done a lot of production for people. I've been doing a lot of things. So there's lots of creative projects I've been working on. And then life-wise, I have a kid now.
Yeah.
A little 10-month-old.
How's that going? I'm sure that's like a completely new experience, but probably feeds into a lot of the stuff that you were already doing, I imagine. Somehow.
Kind of. It's,
I only know because one of my best friends just had a kid too. And it's just crazy to see that switch, you know?
It's really weird having a kid. My experience is probably very different than most people's, I think. Where like, I think a lot of people derive a lot of like meaning, like that's maybe a point in someone's life where they're like, I feel a lot of meaning, and that was not the case for me. I really kind of had an existential breakdown after having my kid, and I was like, I think the idea of someone coming into the world and you're like realizing like, I'm gonna screw them up, like it's just what's gonna happen.
I'm sure that's terrifying.
You're like, I'm just gonna ruin everything. And that was a very interesting, like, especially like a couple weeks after, for sure. It was just like a heavy fog of like depression and like everything is meaningless. Like, since then.
So you got the postpartum depression.
I did, yeah. My wife had a tough time too, and I won't even pretend that I had the hard side of things when it comes to. I have lots of things happen with pregnancy and marriage and all of that.
Well, but last time we talked on the podcast, you were kind of, I mean, obviously I don't think you even knew you were going to have a kid at that point, but you were talking about, you and I were sort of just relating on how we were both trying to sort of narrow down all of the different creative endeavors and like all of these different things. Because I think it was spawned from Jordan saying you were artistic to a fault. You know?
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, that's probably true. And I'm working on, trying to kind of figure that out. So I guess now, with all this time and all these new things, I guess, what are your thoughts on that? Like kind of have your priorities shifted and and all of that?
For sure. I don't know if I've narrowed, but I've focused. So in the sense of where I've worked really hard on getting less and everyone gets caught up in the grind and I'm not making things that anyone listens to or no one, they get, I think so many artists find themselves in that space where they're just feeling, where they're like, I have to make it. And you're like, if you're making art at all, you're making it. And you just, you need to, I don't even know because that's this is going to, not to be like super political, but it's a pretty privileged thing of me to say, to be like, I have a lot of support. I've got a lot of, that's not to say you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's not at all what I'm saying here.
But I think I get what you're saying in the sense, because I kind of feel the same way. Like if you're basing your success off of an idea that you have of what it's supposed to look like, then you're going to be let down over and over again. But if you're basing your success off of just kind of having the freedom over your own time to be able to do the things you want to do, then I think that's, like you said, if you're making it, you're making it. Yeah. Like for real, if you're making it to gain something else, then you're going to get let down because art doesn't do that for people. Very easily,
Yeah. I think more what I've come to think about is like, so now that I have a kid and like I'm married, my partner, is like kind of more academic. She does a lot. Her name's Grace. Hi, babe. I love you. You're not listening to this. Who am I kidding?
Hopefully she will.
You hear me talk enough. You don't want to hear this. No, but and so I do. I think this is going to sound very weird, but that reality check of like, oh, I've got to make money somehow. I actually have to provide. I have to have an income. Was very difficult. I'm not going to pretend like it wasn't. And it, geez, that just makes me sound so like I had it so easy before, like I was like, man, I just, dope around. And so many people, I think in the creative field work a lot harder than I ever did because they actually have to hold down a job and then go do something. And before I worked, but I was not working nearly as hard. And I think that, that forced perspective of like, oh, I have to make something with this, and you just have to finish shit, Yeah. That really was helpful for me, just to be like, oh, well, this project I'm working on is not the end all be all. This isn't my magnum opus. I have to do this. I have to finish it, and then I've got to invite people to interact with it, and I've got to work really hard at that. And that practicality of just like, it's a thing, get it done, move on to and like. That has been so helpful for me. I think that's the biggest change probably from last time we talked is I've really settled into like, this is going to sound kind of callous, but taking a very business-like approach to my creativity of saying, in the sense of being, what am I investing in? Yeah. Is it worth it? And how much time is it worth? Yeah. And also looking at the, Jesus is not very holistic and not very like artsy, but like, what are your assets? Yeah. How much energy do you have? How much time do you have? How much money? And then what do you have? I think the big thing for me, I'm thinking a lot about this because we were living here in Kansas and we had a really nice big townhouse here and did not pay a lot for it. I had a studio in the basement. So I had a whole music studio, and I was recording albums for people. I was recording like an album for myself that was like full band. Yeah. Everything I'd ever wanted,
And that was your brother Space Bear.
Yeah, brother. Yeah. And I'm still, and I was also doing work for a couple other bands. Do you know Victoria Gunderson by any chance?
I don't believe so. Local?
Okay. Local. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of local guys, greenish, parentheses. Who's that one? Keheilani, or Kehe is her artist name now.
Okay. I think she does loops and stuff like that. Does she do?
Kind of. That's what she does.
I think I've seen her live.
Yeah.
She's like a looper pedal.
Yeah, she lives in England now, actually.
Oh, wow.
But we'd worked together on an album for about a year, and I produced that whole thing. So I didn't do everything by any stretch of the imagination. She's very talented as a writer, and a very good singer. But she kind of brought me lots of stuff, and I would kind of build out sonic work, and that was a fun
That's
album.
cool.
And that's kind of what I do. But and that was fun to like be like, oh, I'm making money doing this, and I kind of shifted from like, and that was kind of the first step of like thinking. I don't like the word business, like a true business, like in the sense of where like you're producing something and you're enjoying something and you're looking at it not with like this kind of like I'm a grand artist, but like I'm just a guy. This is my job.
Yeah, and there has to be a practical path or like a way for you to actually achieve the things that you're trying to do. And I totally get that, what you're saying, because I wrestle with that a lot too. Yeah. But I've been looking at it more lately as like alchemy, where it's like, okay, like last time we talked a lot about spiritual ideas and concepts and sort of the things that push us to do all of the things that we do as artists and creators. But there has to be the sort of like worldly material side of the yin and the yang, you know. I think you have to alchemize those two things to get them to balance.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, you have the artistic drive and to be creative and to do all this, but then there has to be like a logistical aspect to it. And I've been, I think, kind of going through similar things too, because you know, I've like I told you, we're in kind of a transitionary period in the house right now, and then same with like with the business side of things. Like I've got I have a few like I have one small business that's actually a business, but then I have like a lot of other ideas about where me and my girlfriend and my passions like musically and all that are going. And one of them is like the van life and and travel. But like in terms of how do we make this sustainable, I have to think about it like you're saying, like that worldly, like let's think logistics. How are we going to make money? Like how are we going to live if we want to travel, then how are we going to make that sustainable and pull in an income while we're traveling part-time? Are we going to, are we going to work for a while and save up and take breaks? Or are we going to figure out a way to monetize all of this?
Exactly.
So that we can actually put all of our effort into these creative things. It's hard, it's hard to figure that out. But it's interesting. And I feel like artists like you and I kind of have a natural resistance to like the worldly part of it. Like we don't want to be businessmen. But you kind of have to a certain extent.
And I think it for me, it depends on the day. Some days I think very business-like, and some days I'm like, screw the system. I hate everything.
Yeah, same. And like it depends on... I have the conspiracy guy in my head, but then there's also like the entrepreneur where it's like you're building something for yourself at the same time. Yeah.
I think this is kind of basing off of that, something that's really been occupying my mind. Do you listen to Revisionist History at all? Malcolm Gladwell's podcast?
I've heard of it. Okay. I haven't actually listened to it much.
Not to like plug another podcast, but like...
Oh, no, it's fine. I do that all day.
Highly recommend it. It's super good. Do you know Malcolm Gladwell?
I've heard of him. Okay. I think I've actually heard him on other podcasts, but I haven't listened to his.
He's a really good thinker.
But I know the concept, like revision, because he actually goes through and kind of deconstructs what we thought about history and then kind of tells you the real truth of it, like how it was really like.
And I think later on it becomes Revisionist History just becomes kind of a title, and the real title should be whatever Malcolm Gladwell wants to talk about.
Yeah.
But so in this podcast he does it's very fascinating, something that I've gravitated towards, and I'd like done some looking into, but he kind of gravitates and talks about the kind of the philosophy of the Jesuits, which is really interesting. You think of like Jesuits and Catholics, there's kind of a very religious aspect to them, but the Jesuits, and I think we see this especially in Pope Francis right now, they have a very I'm going to have to look something up on my phone
Oh,
right
you're
now.
good. That's totally fine.
So he talks a lot about so the Jesuit model. So Jesuits, traditionally, from what I can remember, I'm sorry to any Catholic or anyone who's a historian, they are a kind of they're a kind of a religious sect of Catholicism. And their their birth came out of a very complicated time in the Catholic Church where decisions were having to be made. And basically their kind of model is based on this kind of idea of descending into the particulars. And so so much of religion, be it Christianity or any sort of spiritualism, you can say so much upwards in the head, big ideas, big beliefs. And what the kind of the Jesuits believed is just like descend into the particulars and look at the actual practical evidence of everything.
So sort of like a realist approach.
Yeah, in the sense of where you're not denying spirituality. You're not a pragmatist. You're not saying there is only what matters is the real and the material, the profane, if you're talking about kind of the sacred and the profane ideas. But what I liked is you look at, and it comes up across, there's a whole interesting story in there about the creation of birth control. Because the birth control pill was actually created by a Catholic. Interestingly enough, he made the birth control pill.
Weird.
And then he had to defend it against his own church, his own deep religious belief. And interestingly enough, a lot of people don't know this, there was an initial council kind of headed by kind of the Jesuit side of things. And they basically came to the conclusion the pill's fine. The pill is the same. It should be treated the same way as like natural planning which is something that's and then the current pope at the time, I'm sorry, my fellow Catholics, said basically turned back on that because he is and I'm not here to badmouth anyone, but he's kind of up in the clouds in the sense of where he has to think, he's always thinking of the big ideas and the ideals, and he's not thinking about the practicality of like, okay, here I'm saying this is what everyone must believe, as opposed to like, there's like people who've got 12 kids and they're poor as shit, and we're living in a society where that's getting more and more expensive to have children. Yeah. So what do? And he's not saying, there's that sense in where, Anyway, all that was a tangent, but all that to say that I've really been drawn to that idea of descending into the particulars, where when you're running across an issue, be it ethical or just philosophical, or how you can live your life, it's how do you dig into that particular thing and do it well while not ignoring the rich spiritual nature of things.
It sounds very integrated to me. Like maybe that's the goal. And that's why I think about the whole yin and yang thing, because it's that balance. But what you were saying kind of reminded me of what we scratched on last time we talked, when we were talking about belief and just kind of faith. And I was talking about how, for me personally, I realized at a certain point, kind of like the Catholic Church, or really any religious institution, when it comes to a moral decision that needs to be made, it splits and there becomes two churches at that point. And that's kind of why there's so many different religions now, is because every time there's a big decision to be made, and we think that if it's supposed to be like we are people of God, then every decision we make is a moral decision. Or a spiritual decision. And so we kind of have to, or I feel like fear causes us to have the desire to put everything in black or white, right or wrong, all of this. But I was talking about how Alan Watts once said that true faith clings to nothing. And so it sounds like one of the ways to integrate all of these ideas of right and wrong, of this is what we should do, this is what we shouldn't do, is sort of the practical way of like, well, does this make sense in our life today? If we just consider the moment, what are we dealing with in this moment? What decisions are being made out of fear? What decisions are being made out of love? Then I think, come to the truth of it. But if you're looking at all of these things as like some sort of higher moral standard that's a blanket for everyone, then I think you're going to leave some people out, or, you know, you're not going to see eye to eye with other people or even yourself.
Yeah.
Because I thoroughly believe that the way that you see the world, like your worldview, becomes how you judge yourself and then therefore other people. You know, so it's like if you're looking at everything through a certain lens, then that's how you're going to see the world, you know? But if you, I've been really interested in like Stoic philosophy lately. So if you kind of go the Stoic route, which is indifference, then it's like, well, my opinion doesn't matter. My feelings don't matter. What matters is what's true. And so, yes, the feelings are like sort of signifiers to what is true. Like if, say, you're feeling insecure, is it because of something someone else did, or is it fear in yourself, you know?
Yeah.
And then that tells you whether or not you should let go of that or do something about it. So it's like your emotions just tell you either let go or do something. Those are your two options most of the time.
Yeah.
And so I really like that approach to this sort of like pragmatic spirituality lately.
Yeah, yeah.
I've just been really interested in that because the more and more I, you know, get obsessed with this type of stuff, the more it just brings me back to this kind of teaching of the present moment. You know, it's like, it's all we've ever really had.
Yeah.
Is the moment, is now. It's always been now.
Yeah.
It'll always be now.
That's
so what do we do?
Yeah.
Well, we act now. We do what we can now.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
Yeah.
You know?
I do think there's something interesting, and I want to touch back on something in a second, but I do think there is something interesting about when the present moment is very hard. I think we're living in a very difficult time. And everyone lives in a difficult. I'm not going to try to pretend like where this time period is the worst it's ever been, but I think there are times that are better and there are times that are worse. And I'm someone who loves looking through history and is interested by how people. I mean, I'm interested in how people have made art through the years and have reacted to their present moments. But I do think it is. I'm very curious that faith clings to nothing quote. Because I think I have a very different view of faith, and I'm just curious. I want to hear you flesh it out because I think I've got a response, but I want to understand what you mean by that.
Okay, so basically, throughout
because I guess here's my initial thought. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're good.
Faith I feel like the very definition of faith is to cling. But continue with what you were saying. I'm just curious what you fleshed out.
I think we do have maybe a slightly different definition of faith.
Yeah.
Because I think that faith and belief are two different things, like very different.
Yeah. I do.
And then nothing also, I have a different definition for nothing than most people.
Okay.
Because nothing, take it for what it truly is. It is no thing.
Yeah.
It is not material. That does not mean that nothing is also not everything, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Because on a scientific level, like on a molecular scale, at a quantum scale, if you look at the universe, it's mostly nothing. Most of it is nothing. So to cling to nothing is to, I think, embrace all of existence. And I think that, so the root for the word belief is leaf, which means to wish. So if someone says, I believe in something, then what it really means is they're saying they wish it to be true. And I believe in a lot of things, but I don't put faith in things that I believe in, because things that I have faith in don't require belief. Things that are true don't require belief, because you don't have to wish them to be true. They're already true. So when I say that faith clings to nothing, how I see that, from what I've heard is that if you're clinging, then it means that you're forming an attachment to an idea. And existence is ever changing, and so are you. And if you're clinging to something, then it's most likely it's out of fear. because you want something to be some way. And, even the Bible talks about, I shall not want, I shall not worry about tomorrow or worry about, it's all about getting you to the present moment. And so I think that faith and hope, the way that they're used, actually take us out of the present moment. Because if your hope, I have faith in the present moment, I guess that's about it, and really.
Interesting. I guess.
Does that make sense at all?
It does.
Okay.
And I think.
I might sound like a crazy person.
No, I think I don't think that's a terrible way. I think for me, and especially, it's been a rough couple years for my wife and I. And I think part of that is, what do you do when the present moment is particularly difficult? And it is, when it feels as though the present moment is against you. I'm curious, have you read any Soren Kierkegaard by any chance?
Mm-mm.
Okay. I can't recommend him enough. He's a 16th or 17th century, sorry, Ben Markley, I'm totally getting this wrong. Danish existentialist philosopher, Christian existentialist philosopher. Fascinating. I mean, he's kind of the father of existentialism. As a philosophy, he in this time in kind of the Church of Denmark. Wow, it took me a second to be like Danish, Daneland. I was doing that earlier today too.
Dania.
I was doing. But he was very rigid and very like, this is what you must believe, and and he totally, and like, there's only orthodoxy and there's no mystery in faith. There's no mystery in belief or religion. There's no room for any of that.
Yeah,
and he was totally against that. He was the kind of the one man force fighting against this. But one of the books he wrote is called. That I really love is Fear and Trembling. I'm going to
write that down so I remember
it. Fear and Trembling. He in it, he takes the story of Abraham and Isaac going up to the mountain to sacrifice.
And good story.
It's fascinating.
It's a good story. I really want to know how you feel about that story.
Yeah, well,
in particular,
this book changed so much, and I'm going to butcher it because I read the book a while ago, but he basically kind of posits, he's like, we look at this story as God tests Abraham, and that's kind of there's a patent answer, is like, Abraham was simply, and like, what we need to understand is, this really ties in, I think, with the moment, and I think this is kind of maybe how I differ, is I'm like, fear is a huge part of the moment, and part of that is I think sometimes you just can't wish it away. Sometimes it stays. And I think that's because if we look at that story, God has to, Abraham isn't some, Kierkegaard kind of compares it to like the Greek or, the Roman emperors who would have to sacrifice their daughters to save a city, and the sense of where they're a tragic hero. They have to give up something, but they become heroic. Yeah. But what Abraham is doing, he's following the absurd. He's following utter meaninglessness. Like in the sense where in that moment, it is actually right for him to kill Abraham. Like that is the philosophical, because, this is all positing. This is all to build a philosophical case. This isn't to say, this is what happened during this this is the only way to read this story. I think. But it really, he's like, and so what Abraham becomes is in faith, he becomes utterly alone. Kierkegaard calls it the knight of faith, in the sense of like a knight on a horse, in the sense of he is a lone creature. Yeah, the dark night of the soul. Yeah, he must, and the sense of there's no one else who can carry this burden of faith, of I utterly subject myself in that sense to God. And so I think in the sense of where I'm like, faith in those times of hardship, in those times of true utter darkness, there needs to be something you can cling to. And I think that is where Kierkegaard, what he gets at.
Do you think that is a clinging or an acceptance, though?
I think it's a clinging.
Because then what do you suppose that you'd be clinging to?
And I think that's what it is I think you're grasping at something. I think nothing is actually, that idea of no thing isn't bad. But I think I think what's really important there is I think acceptance is a word that I think is really important. It's used a lot in like kind of Buddhist and Hindu traditions. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something to learn a lot from, that accepting of where you're at and being at peace. But I think there's something really beautiful in kind of the Christian Western tradition of reaching, of desperation, of that sense of where everything is wrong. You're compelled to act. And I think what Kierkegaard says is you don't cling to the orthodoxy or the kind of the ideal, these kind of things that everyone else around you. It's you and your soul confronting, if you would call it God, that's what I would probably call it. Yeah. I think just for simplicity, I'm not going to sit here and be like the being, whatever. I'm just like, it's God. Okay, I'm going to call it. And I think that's really what I've been drawn to, is this idea of you don't know what you're reaching for. And so you move forward in this faith. And so what you're clinging, you are moving. There's a motion. And in that motion, you accept what's around you, But if you sit and stand, you're paralyzed. And if you run and cling to something else, something tangible, you're a deer in the headlights. You're paralyzed. You're running. You're just, but if you move forward, I don't know. That's kind of...
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. It just brings up so many, there's so many different routes I feel like we could go down.
I know, yeah.
With this, because one of the things, when you're talking about this sort of inescapable feeling that everyone has and the desire to cling to something, I think that true faith is actually sort of the antidote to that feeling. Yeah. And if you have faith to go back down my path, because I totally get what you're saying, and I don't even think I think we're really, it's sort of semantical, this conversation. It's I think we agree, but we maybe use different words on how to look at it. But
everyone's different. Everyone has a different experience, and so you use words that help you deal with your past and deal with your own issues.
Yeah, and it's a story. The story you tell yourself is the most real one, and you can't really take that away from anyone. But at the same time, my story involves a lot of looking at the same stories like Abraham, but through all of the different lenses that I can, Yeah. And so I've been really, especially with the Old Testament, really fixated on this idea that the word sin, when it's used throughout Scripture, I think is synonymous with the Sanskrit idea of ego. And suffering, universal suffering, and the ego, the small self. When you talk about this desire, this natural yearning that we all have to not be in the present moment because it's so terrifying. Yeah. That feeling of wanting to cling to something bigger than yourself. Yeah. And what all of that fear, that desire, that yearning, is kind of what I feel like Paul describes sin as a lot in the New Testament, of something we're all a slave to, something that we all have fallen short of, and that we all deal with. Yeah. What does everyone deal with? Also, ego. We all have an ego. We all feel that separation of the self. We all believe in some sort of higher ideal self, and then we all believe that we don't act the way we wish we did all the time. Yeah. Who's doing that? It's an interesting question. Who is who here? Yeah. And I think that's sort of what I've been calling the through line, of all these different lenses to look through offer some of the same truths. Yeah. And you can get those truths out of even the Old Testament stories like Abraham, that seems to be a story about a psychopath who's willing to kill his son. It sounds like that. Yeah, if you're not a Christian and you read that story, you think, well, Abraham is a horrible parent. Yes. But if you look at it as, instead of taking it literal and look at it as an archetypal story about someone who is willing to give up what they believe is the most important thing to them for a higher ideal, then you get Jesus. Same thing. Yeah. He took it a step further, sacrificed himself because he didn't have a son, supposedly. So I think you can look at these as archetypal sort of narratives and things that we all deal with.
Yeah.
And sort of zoom out on that more grander scale. And in that sense, shouldn't we all be like Abraham? Shouldn't we be willing to give up the thing that we love the most for the thing that we believe in the most?
Yeah.
You know?
That reminds me, yet again, Kierkegaard. I'm a huge Kierkegaard fanatic. In his book, Sickness Unto Death, he describes basically this idea of sickness unto death is despair. And he describes it in three tiers. And it lines up perfectly with what you're saying with the ego, this idea. And he says, some people, they will not, he uses really weird wording because while also being a brilliant philosopher, he was a jackass and wrote entire books as parodies of Heidegger and a bunch of or Hegel.
Oh, wow.
And it was just one of those people who's like, I'm going to make fun of you.
So he's like a mystic and the jester kind
exactly.
of guy.
But he writes some people suffer from the will to not be oneself, meaning you don't want to be yourself. You don't like you.
Yeah, I'd say everyone deals with that to a certain extent.
But he also says some people desire not to be a self. They don't want to be anything.
Yeah.
But he says kind of the highest, the most destructive tier is the will to be oneself, in the sense of you accept yourself for who you are in a way that's not good. In the sense of, what does it even matter? Why would I ever improve?
Ooh, that's the job of the ego.
Yeah.
That
and
is
just to say, I'm fine, I'm totally okay.
I've been learning this. I just read this book about the science of meditation, and it talks about how literally our emotions, they create chemicals in our body that want feedback. They want to create more of themselves. They want to do that. And our brain has something called the default mode network. That's the sort of the connective tissue between all of it that is where we get the idea of the self. It creates the narrative of our life, the story. It's the pattern recognition. It's what controls our autonomic nervous system and all the things that we don't pay attention to what we do, like digestion and brain activity and all of that. So all that's to say that I think that our body and our mind are tied to what I call the ego. And I think what Christians call sin. In the sense that the ego's job is to justify itself and to fully accept itself because it's afraid of its own mortality, if that makes sense. So if you look at like the fruit of knowledge as consciousness, as like human consciousness, then what happens when we gain the ability to be aware that we're aware?
Yeah.
Well, then you gain the knowledge that, that fruit over there is rotten. So am I going to die? Because I can conceptualize the past, present, and the future all at the same time. So I'm aware that I'm going to have to work, bear children, die, all of those things that God says right after they eat the apple. So that comes with human consciousness. So I think that the ego is sort of the body's reaction to the predicament that humans are in.
Interesting.
With having this crazy gift that we have that we call the spirit or consciousness or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Man, but it's so interesting to me.
I wish my wife was here because she's very intelligent. And also knows a lot about kind of the historical context of biblical narratives.
Ooh.
Knows a lot. She's very intelligent.
Super fun.
And I feel like
I'm a nerd for that stuff too.
She's a really she's a poet, writer, too. Much better poet than I am.
Dang. I'm gonna have to meet her.
Yeah,
sounds
I know.
awesome.
We'll have to catch up.
She's in Chicago?
She's here now. She's with us.
Awesome.
So she's she's hanging out with me.
How long are you guys in town for?
Till next Saturday, actually. So
sweet.
Yeah.
Dude, we could grab dinner or something.
That'd be awesome.
That would be so cool. Heck
Anyways, making plans during your podcast.
Yeah, why not?
And I think even more though, just to even bring it back to the practical, like to kind of like these big ideas. It's like that. I think what's fascinating is like you can think all these things, but in the end, like how does it manifest itself? It manifests itself in like being a dick to someone you love, you know, like, and I always try to undercut myself with that, to be like, not to say that I'm good at it, because I am a jerk. And like, I think what it comes down to is that dying to self is like, you have to bring it to the practical. Because if you stay up here and you say, here's all these big ideas of morality, whether you're kind of pushing for a very black and white morality, or if you're pushing for the grays and the intricacies, it doesn't matter. You're always gonna be a dick to someone. You're always gonna be horrible.
Yeah.
And you always have to come back and say, I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that.
Yeah.
And myself got in the way. I got in the way of being a decent human being.
Yeah.
Because I was insecure, because I was petty, because I forgot, and I think that's always, I think that more than anything, that's what having a kid and having marriage has taught me and that is the most like cliche thing. Everyone says it. Everyone is like, you just learn you're a terrible person. And you're like, yeah. And you also learn your partner can be a terrible person too.
It sounds like you're talking a lot about humility though.
Yeah. I mean,
it just kind of, you have to be honest about that.
And like a very brutal humility. I think humility can get passed off as like, oh, they're so humble. It's like, no, humility should hurt. Like you should be consistently hurt, I think.
Wow. Dude, that's such a true statement though. Yeah, it does. Well, because pain is like the sign of transformation.
Yeah.
That's why, because I don't take a very literal approach to religion. I think that hell is such a, like the idea of fire and all of that is such a symbolic picture, because what does fire do? It literally cleans and transforms things. Yeah. Like that's what it is. It's a transformational element. Yeah. So the idea, if you want to purify something like a needle or
fire,
yeah, fire. Like, so I think that that's kind of very representative of like what those things feel like. Like when you get burned, like,
it's like, you realize something about
you're learning at the same time. It's actually a good thing. It's a transformation.
I think it's really interesting that it's just a literary nerd thing, but Dante, his ninth circle of hell is freezing. It's ice. There's no change to happen. You are stuck.
Wow.
Similarly, I mean, not to be a Lewis nerd here, but I got a shout out for my dad because he loves C.S. Lewis. Have you read much of him? A little bit? Not
a ton. I do. One of his quotes that I love, though, is the whole walking away from God is the most religious experience of your life. It's one of the things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
But Lewis wrote a book called The Great Divorce, which is about basically his allegorical interpretation of hell. That it's like, and it's just a literary experiment. He's not saying this is what hell is. He's just like, okay, let's look at what hell could be. And it is everyone stuck in themselves. The idea is the sense of everyone just becomes the worst part of who they are.
Man, you call that a literary experiment, but I kind of see that as the real thing. Personally. Yeah. I wouldn't call myself a realist or I don't have any ist or ism right now. I am who I am. I believe what I believe and think how I think, but I don't.
I am a nihilist. I believe in nothing.
I try not to cling to things, but like there are some things that just feel so true to me. Yeah. And like the more angles I look at all this from, the more that through line that I mentioned shows up. Kind of like what we talked about last time when I asked you if you believe in objective truth. I was like, is objective truth real, do you think? And it's like, we're not, who are we to even try?
Oh, yeah. It's like,
but at the same time, I think we were talking about whether or not it's even helpful to think in terms of that. I don't think it's helpful to cling to terms of objective truth, but I feel like gained a lot of benefit from holding all of these things loosely and looking at them through all of these different perspectives, because then I'm able to see that through line where things just sound true. Yeah. And like what you're saying about how C.S. Lewis creates this story that might be allegorical. Yeah. But talking about hell as isolation in the self, to me, if you trace the lineage of spiritualities from like Hindu all the way up to modern Christianity, I think that's what they're getting at. Yeah. Is that, and if you look at the mental illness and the opiate epidemic and all of the problems that we're dealing with in the world now, it's a problem of self and identity. A lot of, I believe, at the core of it.
Yeah.
we're treating a lot of symptoms right now, but not a lot of people are getting to the root of what a lot of people would argue postmodernism brought.
Yeah.
You know, in this whole materialistic way to look at things, because everything's so based on the individual, the identity, and we're all stuck in that.
Yeah.
And if you're judging yourself in that way and everyone else, then you're isolated.
Yeah.
You're not really connecting with people. And what is hell other than isolation?
Yeah.
You know?
It's being stuck. It's being unable to communicate.
Yeah.
Or
And better yet, not even knowing that you're there.
Yeah. And and being
Do people in hell know they're in hell?
Yeah, that's an interesting.
Yeah. Because isn't that what knowing really means in the Greek sense? Like gnosis, to know.
Yeah.
To be still and know. I think that is what the garden is, or the kingdom, so to speak. If you want to talk about creating that here and now, then just know. Just
kind of, yeah.
Just know.
Though I think...
Be awake.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm totally wrong.
Yeah. Because I think there's something about... Because it's like, I think... I do think there's a huge issue of knowing and gnosis, but also like you said, humans are humans. We're all very different. We all treat things very differently. And to say everyone just needs to sit back and know, it's like, well, and I think part of it is like and this is where I'm really drawn back into that very practical kind of Jesuit viewpoint of just lean into the particularities, because then what you have, and I'm bad at this, but then that's a call. You're called to know yourself, but then you're called to act out of that. And I think that's what I really, maybe that's kind of my issue sometimes with a lot of modern spirituality, is there's a lot of sitting around and thinking and knowing, and you're like, that's great. There's people dying,
yes.
and we live in systems that are corrupt. We live in
a lot of belief, but not a lot of action.
Yeah. And I think that's what we see out of Christ more than anything, is like Christ spent time on the mountain on his own. He went, he prayed alone. He lived a life.
Meditated a lot, which people don't talk about.
Yeah. He meditated.
I wish they would talk about
and he
that
meditated.
More. That's my biggest beef with Christianity right now. No practice.
Really? Not
that is.
There's a lot of other beefs.
That is my biggest beef. Well, I think. Okay, never mind. I have a lot of beefs, but I think that's the one that I think would be the quickest fix for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Look inward. Quit looking outward.
Yeah.
We have right now in America, we have a belief-based religion, but not a transformation-based religion. It's all about believe this and this and this and this, and then you go to heaven. You're good.
Yeah.
And then you got to tell everyone else to believe this too.
Exactly.
That's how you make disciples. But how about wrestling with those beliefs till they transform you and cause you to act in a different way?
Exactly.
That people see that and they want for themselves.
Yeah.
Because then you are making disciples by how the book of James says, by leading by example.
Yeah.
Don't just tell everyone what to do and how to be.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what you believe.
Yeah.
It matters what your beliefs do for you and for others.
I think that's, my wife and I talk about this a lot, is that's kind of one of our biggest issues with a lot of Christianity. And it's what they often don't practice what they preach, and I think it's something you see a lot in institutions. And this is something, a conversation we've had a lot is, can an institution even be Christian?
Can it? Yeah.
Because an institution,
that's such a good question,
in the capitalist society is self-sustaining, it's self-preserving.
Okay,
and
I think there's another way to
model-
frame that question.
Yeah.
Can a Christian community be healthy together?
Oh, yeah.
And especially after a certain size.
Yeah.
Because once it gets to a certain size and it becomes an institution,
Yeah.
it kind of takes on a life of its own. And then you have to ask, do these people really believe what they say they do? Because they don't act it out.
I've been going to churches pretty much all my life, and you see institutions, and you're like, I think there's a sense in where it's this, and it's a question I think a lot of people need to wrestle with, is, so if the point of an institution is to sustain itself, to grow, like a business, in the sense of that, if that's its goal, And Christ's model is to give of oneself to continue to give and to give and to give. Mm-hmm. And ultimately Christ, as Christ shows, till there's nothing left of you, till you are dead. Like,
yeah, literally, that's what he did.
Yeah, and it's like, and I think, can those two ideals be kind of reconciled? And
I tend to believe they can, because I think that's what the cross means. Like, literally, if you look at, because the cross existed way before Jesus was a thing as a symbol. And
really?
Yeah, in Judaism, the cross, it was just kind of more of an X, but like it was even.
Yeah.
But it represented the intersection between the heavens and the material world. And so the reason that we did that before Jesus even came around was to acknowledge that we are the intersection between the kingdom and the heavens.
Interesting.
And so we are the alchemy of spiritual and material. That's who we are as beings. And so by doing Jewish mantras and things like that, you're sort of acknowledging those things. But I think that that's what it is. And if you look at Jesus's life, he did that.
Yeah.
Like he is the archetype of someone who bared the responsibility of the suffering and sin of humanity at the same time as like the love and contentment of the present moment, or what we call heaven or the kingdom. And that whole idea, he was the perfect example of the intersection between the heavens and the earth.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I think it's possible. We've been shown that it's possible, but I think that fear kicks in and we don't try to be like that. We just worship it and tell other people to be like us.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do you think Jesus even wanted to be worshipped?
The Orthodox part of me says yes.
Do you think? Because wouldn't that be kind of an egoic thing? Like,
I don't know.
Why would he want that?
I'd have to think about that. And I honestly, I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't know. And it's, to me, that's a little bit of a question of like, and ultimately, I think if we are, worship is, I think the whole goal of worship is to become like someone. I'm not going to delve into the whether or not Christ wanted to be worshipped.
Yeah,
per
that
se.
might have been an unnecessary question. But
it feels
I guess
like
it's just more to say the point that Christ said, "Be holy like me," and it doesn't seem like a lot of us believe that that's even possible.
Yeah,
you know, by the way that they act, or like
Yeah.
the institution as a whole.
Yeah.
If we're still talking about that,
and who knows? I mean, I think really it's a big question, and part of me is like, I don't know how good it is to talk about, because it really is like, I think my goal is not to solve the problem ever. I need, everyone needs to grapple with this in themselves, and I don't want to. And I think more than anything, I don't want to come across as someone who's like, I've got a solution.
Yeah,
because
totally.
Lord knows I don't.
Me neither. And I hope I'm not coming across like
Yeah,
that. Because this is just what's cool to share for me. Is like you and I having this conversation and getting to share this with people.
Yeah, and
I don't know if I'm right about any of this, but that's the whole point. Like, this is better.
Yeah.
Ideas like we're trying to be better than we were yesterday.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and
that's the point.
Yeah, and I think more than anything is I don't. Part of me is like, I don't want to be one of those people who just sits and talks about like these. Not like I'm against ideas, but I often find myself when people sit around and talk about ideas, I almost am like, all right, like we've talked a lot about these things, but then it's like, what do we do?
Yeah, what do you actually do? Like, how does this apply?
So when you wake up the next day, am I gonna, and I see someone in need, am I going to do something about that? Or am I going, and of course every day is different, and that's, I think that's the struggle is
that's why I said earlier that my biggest beef with any religion right now is that they don't have a practice. There's no like daily, hey, this is what you do, this is how you do it.
Interesting.
And if you try to do this, belief is not required, just do it, try it, and it will change you.
Do you think that's kind of fundamentalist though? That seems very like prescription based. It almost.
Well, but isn't that what religion really is? Like, if you're gonna participate in a religion, to do something religiously means repetitive. So if you're going to participate in a religion, then I think there should be a structure to it, but something that actually is for you as a person, not for like to put on a show for those around you, which seems to be so much of what church is about now. It's putting on a show, but it's not changing you. It is for some people. I won't dismiss that. I've had transformative experiences in churches or religious gatherings. But I guess what I'm really trying to get at is that I've just been geeking out over meditation lately, and just like the amazing things that does in your life, and the literal miracles that it creates is phenomenal. It's amazing. It really is. And Jesus did meditate. Most of the Messiah figures meditated, and I don't think people talk about that enough. The actual like scientific and spiritual benefits
of meditation.
That a practice of just sitting down and being with yourself and your thoughts for a few minutes a day, morning or at night, what that can actually do. I think if that were incorporated into more of these idealistic religions or belief systems, then we'd actually start to see transformation in a different way, and it'd be pretty cool.
I have a thought on that. I do think we do see some transformation. I think that's something I think because especially of culture today and a lot of what kind of traditional evangelicals ism has promoted. I think we only see negative, but I do think I have personally seen people change for the better, make better decisions. No one does it perfectly, and I think that's something.
And I want to make that clear too. Though, like, I'm not bashing on because I do. Like I also grew up like going to like youth group and being involved in church like as much as I possibly could for like 10 years, and I won't dismiss that it gave me structure at a time in my life that I really needed it. And it gave me something to believe in. It gave me a moral code. It gave me a family and friends. And I won't dismiss that that is beautiful. But for me personally, it just got to a certain point where I felt like I was growing past it, and that wasn't okay. Like it wasn't okay to have some of the questions that I had, and to have some of the beliefs that I was starting to lean toward, and things I wanted to explore. It just kind of felt like that wasn't okay anymore. And it's a bummer because I miss that community. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here is, have those types of conversations that I had at youth group with my buddies. But more open and not feel like someone's going to get mad at us.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's a bummer, I guess. Because to me that, like I said, like faith is not fear. So if you're afraid to have a conversation about something, then who is your God? Like how small is your God if it can't handle this conversation? If you if you can't question it, like if it's real, it's real. It doesn't matter what questions you have. Like it'll show itself. If
Interesting.
It's real. At least that's how I thought about it, because I think that's what doesn't glory mean that to reveal or like something like that?
There's a lot of
a lot of it means revealing.
Revealing one's. God talks a lot about revealing His glory and showing in times of need. I think that's really. So
in order to reveal something, that means it's hidden, which means you have to like search. You got to really search. You got to be a truth seeker, like Jesus says, and Okay, last geeking out on the Bible bit.
Because I got a small story about meditation. I want to get to it just in a second.
For that though, I think you'd really like this interpretation of the verse, "The meek shall inherit the earth." I was reading this Jordan Peterson book, the 12 Rules for Life. Phenomenal book if you haven't read it.
I have some problems with Jordan Peterson, but continue.
A lot of people do. I think if you read his book, you might change your mind, to be honest.
I have a lot, let me clarify that. I have a lot of respect for a lot of his ideals. I think he really, he gets in a lot of arguments. I think he has no business arguing, and he makes a lot of claims that are very poor when he's in those spaces. I
believe it. I also think he's amazing at keeping his cool when people are being completely irrational towards him, though. It's pretty amazing how he can be like, polite to, what was it, Megyn Kelly, who was like trying to bash him? So you're saying, and then we just make up something, and it's like, no, didn't say that, didn't. Didn't it all say that?
but at the same time, like I think it isn't really, and this is something that I've thought a lot about, and my wife has helped me think a lot about, is like in that position, like he does have a lot of power there.
Oh yeah.
He's the guy who he's the male. He's the one who's respected. And first of all, I do think a lot of his claims can be they've led to a lot of poor thinking, especially kind of in masculine thinking.
If you say his sort of tags, then they can be very abrasive. Like clean your room. Yeah. That's like one of his biggest things. I think, and that is there's a lot of deeper philosophy underneath that statement. Just clean your room.
And I think what it is for me,
he's also like, for the people like us who fell out of like organized religion, I think he's kind of become like the pastor for people around our age, a lot of men especially, that just haven't had a guidance, you know, and naturally that leads to a lot of stupid ways of looking at it. But it's just like anything else, like with Christianity or Buddhism or Catholicism or anything else. I don't like the way most of the people see those things, but do I love their teachings? Like, and that's how I feel about Peterson.
And I feel like my main issue with Peterson is his, for me, it's very much about it's responsibility. He preaches responsibility. Yeah. And I love that. I think that is huge.
But you feel like he's partially responsible for his following and the way they act.
And you're like, I'm not going to say you're responsible for every horrible thing. He's like, no, that's absurd. But his inability sometimes to acknowledge that, I think, bothers me.
I get that. I totally get that.
And that's actually something, this is total tangent. I'm sorry. That's something I really.
It's fine. I think that's why I said I think if you read his book, then you'll have a little bit different of a perspective, because I started getting into him before all of the controversy happened. Yeah. And so I just took it at face value, and I'm like, well, I don't agree with everything perfectly, but it's just like Paul in the New Testament. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff he said, but I still like Jesus and his teachings. Yeah. You know, just because he has one follower that like I don't think I would get along with if I met him, you know, that type of thing. But
it's funny you say that about Paul. I feel the same way. No. Because then I read Acts.
Paul just seemed very opinionated sometimes.
But then you read Acts and you're like, oh my gosh, he's a badass. Yeah. Like, he's just like running around like getting like stoned.
Or James or
you're just like, okay, I'd get along with him. Like if I got a beer with Paul, we'd have a blast.
I'll be honest though, I think I'd like hanging out with John the most. John the Baptist, or John the Seer. They both seem really cool. Did you know never mind. Whole other side thing. Yeah. John in Revelations is not the same John from the book of John. Just learned that not that long ago. Huh. John the Seer and John the Baptist are two different people. Weird. But yeah, I'd get along with them because they seem pretty psychedelic. I just dig that. John does. Yeah. The book of John is the most psychedelic book in the Bible, if you ask me.
It's pretty whack. It's pretty cool though.
Anyway, so to get back to the Peterson thing, he had this interpretation of meek. So the word meek, and the meek shall inherit the earth. I can't remember the actual Jewish word that is used there, but it doesn't mean meek in the sense that we, when we hear that word meek, we think of like kind of standoffish or like shy and, like the people who don't speak up for themselves kind of. It's like, why would they inherit the earth? It doesn't make any sense. But the word that they actually used in the Jewish religion, I think that would have been Hebrew at the time. It means a warrior who keeps his sword sheathed shall inherit the earth. That's what that word actually meant.
Interesting. That's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah, and what that kind of means is like the person who has the self-discipline and the training and the knowledge to know how to battle, to know how to really be a part of the world, on the most material way, but who knows why not to. That's who will inherit the earth.
That's very fascinating. That's an interesting interpretation.
Yeah, isn't it?
I'd have to look into it and see more, because I'm just curious about it, because I do think there's something beautiful about in that there's so much paradox in the sense of poor in spirit. There's, all of these different...
That's another one he talks about. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Because I think you can look at it, but I think there is something beautiful about that paradox of the person you think will not, will. And I think there's something... But I also
it's
really
also
like...
kind of like the Bhagavad Gita, which is like the Hindu Bible, basically. it's about a warrior who becomes like enlightened and doesn't want to battle. But then I think Krishna or whoever the God figure is in that is like, no, you're going to battle, and here's why. So it's like a spiritual text about someone not wanting to be violent, and then the God saying, no, this is why you participate in the world. Like you are a warrior. And like that whole idea, it's sort of that alchemy of like, to bring it full circle, we're talking about the very beginning of like blending the world with your spiritual philosophy or beliefs, and like letting the philosophy and the beliefs be that thing underneath what that you actually
your
do.
Actions, moves you forward, and makes you, because I think that's the big thing is if your belief doesn't, or your belief faith, words aside, if it doesn't, and I always come back to kind of Christ's imagery of the fruit of the Spirit. Of are you a tree that produces fruit? Do you make the world? Do you produce things for people? Do you give? Yeah. Because if you don't, your belief is useless. And no one is going to do it perfectly. Anyway, no, but that's always been my like go-to reminder in just the daily of just like, is this action I do? And not to say that I do this for every action, because I don't. But is it going to better? Is it going to better the world, better this person? I think that would be my goal. By the end of my life, I would like to be doing that. I mean, I'd like to be doing it 100% of the time. I'd like to get to like 25% of the time, 25% of my actions I'm asking them.
Yeah.
I think that's realistic. By the time I die, I could maybe be getting there. Like,
well, that's cool. That's the path.
Yeah.
To me, that's what it means, that that the whole idea of like bringing sin and ego back to the same thing. Yeah. If the path is narrow, then how hard is it to stay in the present moment? Yeah. Like that's how I see that. Like that's the narrow path. Be present all the time
and be caring
and try to bring forth your best self, or
and be humble,
spirit led, whatever that means, which I think is humble, you know, inherently, because what is there to defend? What is there to be afraid of? All of that. There is nothing. There is, because nothing is everything. As weird as that sounds, no thing is everything.
It's a fascinating concept for sure. So.
Yeah. Kind of turns the whole thing on its head.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I could keep doing this forever, but it's already been over an hour. So let's at least shout out all of your stuff again. Yes. Are you still doing like Little Dipper Studios?
So I'm going to give a couple shout outs here. So Little Dipper Studios is like my recording production thing. Currently right now I'm just doing mixing. So if anyone needs mixing, if you want reference tracks, go check out Kay Hayes' album Grain of Sand. Check out Parentheses album Technicolor Bluebird. Check out great band, Kansas City band Greenish. They're an indie band, really young guys, really awesome. Greenish, their album, oh boy, what is it called? Everybody Out. That's what it is. If you're more on the acoustic side, check out Andrew Markley. His album, Alternate Endings is one I did. Victoria Gunderson, another local artist here, amazing, kind of 90s inspired, kind of sublime. We did kind of this really like almost reggae blues rock cut. Just a single called I'm sorry, I do so much stuff now.
Totally cool.
Take the time. Yeah. Take some time or take the time. It's one of those two. But anyway, so I produced and recorded, mixed all those tracks. Currently I'm just mixing because I don't have a studio space. I'm building, I'm working with a guy in Chicago. We're building one out right now, in his like store, but it's taking a while, as everything does. So I'm looking, I love stuff. So that's Little Dipper Studios. You can follow me. Looking at my Instagram. Sorry, I don't like.
No, you're totally good. I'm not sure what the handle is on that, but I have been following you, and it seems like you're busy. So because you moved, like, because you were doing a lot of full bands and stuff before you moved, and so you're just mixing now. Yeah, right now, trying to get a space set up. Yeah, again.
Hopefully we'll get a space set up. But yeah, I love mixing, and I do most anything. I just finished a rock album, like a punk grunge, almost metal, sludgy, really, for a guy named Adam Creston. his like band is Safari, but he
Awesome.
he's not out yet. He kind of recorded with me. He's an old friend from high school.
Oh, nice.
And it fucking rocks. I mean, that thing
That's
is
sick.
the shit. It's so cool.
That's so awesome, man.
And then I do art, Cameron Dupratte. I will have some shows in Kansas City coming up in May, and then hopefully sometime next year. And then my musical side is Brother Space Bear, which you can follow. Those are all just the names. They're just at Brother Space Bear, at Little Dipper Studios,
Sweet.
at Cameron Dupratte. But Brother Space Bear, I do have a song.
Oh yeah, we were gonna. Okay, so this is my idea. Since it's not out yet,
Yeah.
we can either. It's up to you at the beginning or the end. I can just put it in,
Yeah.
and do like a little intro for you,
Yeah.
and just we can say the name of the song, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about it because I wanted to hear your thoughts.
Well, then
but,
let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's. Okay. Are you done shouting everything out?
Trying to think. Oh yeah, I will. So for Brother Space Bear, this song here we're talking about, I've got this. So I have. I dropped an album, Heartlands, very like acoustic folk rock. And that's really the train I'm in. I love acoustic folk rock, but
Yeah.
currently I don't have a studio.
Yeah.
And I have half an album recorded and like ready.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, while I'm waiting to finish it, I've been doing a lot more experimental stuff. So I'll be releasing an EP. Working title is just Experiments in Honesty.
Nice.
And it's just a really odd electronic vocal kind of stuff.
That's
So that's be looking for that in November. I'm hoping to drop it.
Sweet. So let's tell me about your song,
Yeah.
and then we'll just end it there, and
Yeah.
I'll play the song. So
Yeah,
tell me
awesome.
about it, and then we'll just piece it in.
Yeah. So the song here is it's called Weekend. Basically, I've been trying a new technique. I'm a really dedicated songwriter in the sense I love writing lyrics, verse, and melody. I'm really focusing on the core. And I usually like writing from another person's perspective. If you listen to Randy Newman,
Yeah.
he's a huge inspiration for me. Is that kind of, I'm a character when I write a song.
Storytelling. Yeah.
However, I wanted to escape from that and kind of write something about my life, a little more personal, a little easier. So this, I've been working kind of totally different direction where I'll basically got probably 50 gigabytes of just via, all sorts of instruments, loops, and I'll kind of dig around, find something. And I found this kind of loop, kind of this really like weird, just kind of plucky loop that I loved. I think it's from sampled from like some old synthesizer. And then I started building kind of this sonic thing where I built some synths, and then I would, and some string samples, and then I'd use a gate to kind of control them, which is really interesting. And then
That's cool.
I built kind of just the sense, and then basically like a really rough sketch. And then I just sit down on like literally on my couch, probably with a beer in hand, and just like, I sing whatever comes into my head. And this is a song actually, kind of about some of like my wife and I's relationship. And it's this very like very first person, very like stark, sparse lyrics. Like there's no narrative. There's just like in the moment. And it's totally whack for me. I don't ever write like this. And it's really fun to get to do it actually. And like, and it goes in, kind of blossoms into almost definitely a lot of 80s influence, a lot of just kind of almost like danceable. I love the groove. I'm all about that.
That's awesome, man.
So that's the track. And
So a good variety. What's it called again?
it's called Weekend. Yeah.
All right. So I'm not going to do an outro. So anyone listening, if they enjoyed, then the best place to go is patreon.com/betterideas. They can give me money if they want to.
Go there,
Yeah,
give money.
absolutely. Leave a 5-star rating on iTunes.
Do
Make
it.
sure you check out my friend Cameron. That's his book right there, actually.
Oh, yeah.
You notice that?
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
So yeah, he's got lots of cool art, music, production, all sorts of stuff. And this song is
Weekend
by
Brother Space Bear.
Absolutely.
What the hell was that?
Sounded like a great announcer voice.
Oh, thanks.
The song Weekend by Brother Space Bear. See you next week, folks.
Woo! process that changes.